Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod. We have Marcel Petitpas with us today. Marcel is helping digital and creative agencies measure and improve profitability live from Charlottetown, PEI, Prince Edward Island. I think you're the second guest I interview from PEI. Beautiful island, by the way, for those that haven't visited. It's really pittoresque. The ground is red at some spots in Prince Edward Island. It's near New Brunswick. My dad's a native from there. Delicious seafood and very welcoming people. Marcel is co-founder and CEO at Parakeeto, and we're going to talk about agencies. He's been the head strategic coach at Dan Martell as organization for almost 5 years now. We're talking about Dan, fascinating background, fascinating human being, very successful person. He's also been a founder at his own company for approximately 8 years now. So it's going to be a fun convo, folks. Podpire.com is presenting that one. If you want to start or scale a podcast, monetize it. And Qualia is presenting that one too. So you can go to neurohacker.com/CEO wisdom. Use the CEO wisdom coupon code. Qualia is for your mind. It'll help you focus. It helps you have a better memory. And yeah, we'll certainly give you some drive as a busy entrepreneur. Marcel, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to pronounce your name in French too, Charles. It's nice to be here. Nice to have someone pronouncing my name properly. My name is Marcel. As you mentioned, I run a company called Parakeeto, and we help agencies measure and improve their profitability and really take their insight about their performance beyond just looking at financial statements that tell them they didn't make any money 60 days ago, and brings them into being able to make decisions every day that drive their business in the right direction.
So you started into fitness. What kind of impact does this type of background have on you even up to this day?
Sorry, the internet cut out when you started that question. What was the
first
part
part
of
in
that question?
fitness.
Fitness.
What kind of impact did that have on you as a human being even up to this day?
Fitness has gotten me through the hardest times in my life. It's always kind of been that place that I can go and get grounded, blow off steam, relieve stress. And it gave me a lot of confidence as well when I was going through a rough period in my life where I was in shape, I was physically capable, especially in my teen years when I was dealing with a lot of stuff at home. And so that's always been a really important piece of who I am. And I think it also taught me how to lean into experiencing physical discomfort in pursuit of a larger goal, which, as I've learned as an entrepreneur, is basically what you do every day. You do a bunch of stuff, especially when you're first starting a company, a lot of the stuff that you don't want to do, and you do it over and over again every single day for a really long time until you eventually earn the right to pay other people to do that stuff for you. So I think it's been an incredibly valuable learning experience that has set me up to have the discipline to do what it takes to start a business.
Why did you start a business? Are you crazy?
I'm deeply insecure. I wanted to prove to people that I'm better than them, that I'm competent. Like, honestly, those are the reasons I started a business. I have a superiority complex. I think that that's kind of required, right? Like, if you know going in that 97% of businesses fail in the first year, then logically what you're saying to yourself is, well, that's fine because I know that I'm a top 3% human being. So like, that's why I started. I wanted to prove that to people. Today, I continue to run the business for completely different reasons. But if I'm honest, I think that's a big part of the motivation for why I started a company. I had something to prove.
Interesting. I was this, I'm going to prove you wrong, kids, earlier in life, huge ego, probably still have it, but some sprinkles of heart here and there. I wanted to be a lawyer. I almost made it as a lawyer, and lawyers, aka liars, they're always about like, hey, I'm right and you're wrong. At least most of them in my mind. So I think I sort of got rid of that. I think I chased entrepreneurship for freedom, but there's also this thing of pain. I love pain and pushing it upon me and constantly conquering hills and challenges. I did a 30K this weekend in preparation for my 100K, and I have this deep feeling of satisfaction, like Goggins like feeling. I don't think it's insecurity or it's unhealthy, but how would you explain that feeling of, feeling good with oneself after conquering such a hill?
Yeah, it's such an interesting dichotomy because I think when I first started, it was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a millionaire by the time I'm, 30 and retire early and flex on everybody. And then of course, nothing goes the way that you plan. It's way harder than you think it's going to be. You turn out to be wrong about most of the assumptions that you make when you start the business about what the product should be, who your customer is, how you're going to sell to them, yeah, how it's going to work. All that stuff was true for me. And while it was happening, it was so painful. But looking back, I'm really grateful that it was hard and like it should be hard. And if it was easy, then everybody would do it. And it's just been an interesting ride to, like, to your point, feel like once you accomplish the outcome, looking back and saying, like, I'm glad it wasn't easy actually, because it is more meaningful this way. And looking around at this point, I've been around long enough to see all the people that do kind of have a horseshoe up their ass and they start something and they just kind of trip and fall into a great business and it scales quickly. But I never see those people with sustained success. They'll often ride trends. They're the people that, like, I don't know, started a crypto company when crypto was blowing up and now they have no money anymore and they don't actually know how to start a company and build real value. So while all the results didn't come as quickly as I wanted to, and the first 5 years of this were awful and difficult, and I made a lot of sacrifices and I would have been better off just having a job. Now it's like, I actually feel like I'm capable of starting a business in almost any industry because I understand the fundamentals, because I was forced to understand them by not getting them right for a really long time.
Right. So are you this deeply competitive human being, or like were you bullied as a kid? Like why do you have this superiority complex?
That's a really interesting question and one that I've been unpacking with my psychologist for a number of years now. I wish I could tell you what the answer was, but I can tell you some things that I think are reasons that it might be. First, I had a lot of trouble at home. My parents had a very turbulent relationship and a very violent divorce. However, they were individually both extremely supportive and really, like, never doubted my capabilities, allowed me to try and do whatever I wanted, always cheered me on. So they always gave me a lot of confidence because they let me do whatever I wanted and they really supported me in doing that. So I think that's part of it, is like I was allowed to have confidence at home, which, not everybody, I'm learning, has that experience, that their parents like really support them and build them up. And then the other side of it is I did go through some adversity as a kid. I was always, for as long as I can remember, just extremely competitive, love to play sports, love to, compete against other people, love to push myself and be stretched. So I think that's a thing. And then there was a period of time where I was being bullied, especially from like 12 to 16 years old. And I remember that giving me like a real edge. Like there was a year that I broke my ankle, missed hockey tryouts, played in the lowest league. And that was the summer that I like got in the gym, trained, and went to the highest league the year after having been like a middle of the road player like my entire hockey career up until that point. So I've always responded to people doubting me and questioning me by being like getting that kind of fuck you motivation and doubling down on things. That's for some reason always been my natural reaction to it.
So yeah, my parents, they were often fighting as well, never divorced. I guess like a bunch of kids, it's that way. It's really hard to forge a lasting and scalable relationship, near impossible nowadays. And I also remember being classified in lower leagues in hockey, not because I broke anything, because I started like 7 years later my hockey career, which is very odd for a Canadian to say. But yeah, all my friends were at like in double A and I was in fucking A or B, So
Yeah.
that was a bit frustrating for sure. But yeah, like growing up that way, like for other kids out there that want to become entrepreneurs, like what kind of advice would you have for them? Like, is it healthy to take that energy and put it back in a business, like to have that chip on the shoulder?
Yeah, like for kids that want to be entrepreneurs, my biggest advice would just be like, go do stuff now. When you have absolutely nothing to lose, like just go start selling things, start trying things, start businesses, don't go get a summer job. Just like go hustle for the summer, sell lawn mowing, sell water bottles at construction sites, whatever. And one of two things will happen, and they're both good. Either you'll figure out that it's not for you, but you're going to learn so many skills in the process, and you'll be far more employable than almost anybody else in your peer group that always just kind of sticks to the plan that's given to them by society. Or you'll figure out that you do like it, and you'll build all of these skills and relationships, and you'll learn how to sell, and you'll have a much higher likelihood of being successful. And in particular, man, I look back, I took for granted when I was a kid that I had no rent, I had no expenses, I lived at my parents' house, they did my laundry, I had all the time in the world to do stuff like this. So yeah, if you're a kid right now that's still living at home and you have an itch to do this, like just go sell something today and keep doing that until you figure out what you can sell consistently.
How do you find a mentor, and who was your first mentor, and what did you learn from him or them?
That is a great question. I actually wrote a book on this that I never published. It's on my Google Drive. So if anybody wants it, email me and I'll send it to you. But my first mentor was a guy called Yves Doucette. He runs a company called Dovico, which is like one of the first time tracking companies. They started like 20 years ago. They're based in Moncton. And the way I found him was he went to yoga at a studio that my fiance at the time was managing. And she started telling him about me because I wanted to start a business. And then he offered to her to mentor me without even meeting me. So we met up for coffee, and he was just like this incredibly generous person. So I really got lucky there. But what I learned in that process was Eve got so much out of that relationship. I never taught him anything, never worked for him. Like he never got objectively anything out of it, but he had reached a point in his career where he was successful, and he was looking for meaning now and fulfillment. And he got that by spending time pouring into young up and coming entrepreneurs. That really lit him up. So once I understood that part of psychology of a successful person, I started reaching out to more and more people. That's how I got in touch with Dan Martell and was able to build like a massive network of mentors that were far more successful than I was, just by tapping into this understanding that like it really lights them up to coach somebody. And now being in the position that I'm in, I understand that. It's very hard for me to say no to like a young person that's in college or in high school that reaches out and wants some advice, because it makes you feel so good to feel like you had an impact on them.
What about Dan Martell? What did you learn from the guy?
I've learned a lot of things from Dan. It's hard to compress it all into a couple of key lessons, but I think the most important ones would have to be, first of all, just the way he thinks about time has completely shifted how I look at my own life. So all these ideas about buying back your time, structuring your calendar, time blocking, these are all things that I got from him and have been really transformational. I think the other thing that I learned from him really early on was how to bootstrap, in particular, a product business. And really, I've watched him start things from the ground up so many times, and he's so good at just like selling something, figuring out how to deliver it in a really manual and scrappy way, and then very quickly, once he's validated he can sell it and he can deliver it, starting to bring people in to turn that into a scalable system. And he's very, very good at under engineering things early on, which is such an important thing that not enough people do. And I didn't do enough when I was early in my career. The biggest mistakes that I've made as an entrepreneur is over engineering a product or solution before I knew that I could A, sell it consistently, and B, that it was actually getting the outcome to my clients that I wanted. And that has slowed me down and had me, sink a bunch of time and money into ideas that weren't there because of sunk cost. So I think those would be the two biggest things. But I mean, I've learned so much from just being around that guy. We would need a whole other podcast episode to talk about that.
Nowadays, you're helping other agencies get to profits. What kind of agencies do you serve? How do you get them as clients, and what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, we mostly work with agencies that are coming up on that $1 million mark in revenue, up until about 20 million in revenue. And the problem that they're experiencing is the founder can't just throw their evenings and weekends at their problems anymore. They're, clients that have gone way out of scope, the things that they underpriced, the fact that, their team isn't properly utilized, or that they, don't have good processes. Up until that point, as a founder, you can just kind of make up for that with your time. But that is the breaking point where if you want to scale, you need to actually get a grip on these things. And so the way that we've found most of our clients is by publishing free content out into the space that shares our framework for how to start measuring and improving the profitability of an agency, because it's actually quite a nuanced thing. It's really simple in practice, but answering questions like, did we make money on this project? And when do we need to hire a next person? And what's our utilization rate? It's actually quite nuanced if you've ever tried to do it. So we've developed a framework and we try to publish as much free stuff as we can on that and share it on podcasts like we're doing today. And that is really how we've built our business to the point that it's at.
And how do you target them? Like, who's your ICP? Is it Canada, US? Any types of agencies that you prefer serving? Any types of founders?
Yeah, we typically stick to US, UK, and Australia are kind of the major markets that we've had success in. But really, anyone that speaks English and runs an agency, we can work with because we have a distributed team and we work across a lot of time zones. And in terms of the person in the organization that we tend to work with, it's going to be the executive leadership team. So on a smaller firm, it's the founder. In a larger firm, often we're working with their COO and their founder. And those are kind of our two main people that we deal with and sell to, because they're the ones that are really tasked with trying to solve this problem in the business and are struggling with it day to day.
And the client acquisition part on your end, is it cold email, LinkedIn outreach, ads? Like, what do you invest in to get your client?
We, up until now, have not had to do any paid advertising, any cold outreach. We've built the entire business off of what I would call earned media. So asking the question, who already has attention from agencies in the industry? And how do we go borrow that attention from them? And the way that we've done that is by speaking on their stages, at agency events, being guests on agency podcasts, guest posting on agency blogs, doing joint webinars with tech companies that sell to agencies. So that's really kind of been the foundation of our business up until this point. Now we're starting to layer on cold outreach, and we started investing more heavily in SEO as well. But I think that sequencing was important because it was a really capital efficient way to build a brand in the industry. And it's now making the unit economics of these other channels actually much better, much earlier, because we're not having to build trust from ground zero. We actually have quite a bit of it in the industry already. And most of the people that we cold call, they've already heard of us actually.
Right. And tell me about your pricing as well. What do you charge? What's the model and the thinking behind that?
Yeah, we've tried to over time bring pricing down in a sense of trying to make the process of getting somebody to profitability more incremental. So we can start working with a firm for as little as, a $2,000 setup fee and $100 a month to give them like a huge step forward in their ability to model their business. And some of our biggest clients are paying us $5,000 or $6,000 a month to run their entire data operation. So there's a pretty wide spectrum, but we try to take it one step at a time and just build our engagements with clients as they grow. So they kind of have the support that's appropriate for them for where they're at.
Your own podcast, what's the strategy behind it? Who do you invite? What do you discuss about? How do you make sure that you are closing deals out of this?
Yeah, the original thesis with the podcast was, frankly, I wanted to get on everybody else's podcast. So I thought the best way to do that was to invite them on mine first. So I started a podcast. I started inviting all the coaches, the thought leaders, the people that had events onto the show to build relationships, and it was effective. But what we've tried to focus the thesis on of the show on is everything that isn't getting more clients, which is what so many of the other podcasts in the industry focus on, is sales, marketing strategy, how to get more clients for your agency. We wanted to be the one podcast that was talking about everything else that you have to do after that, operations, finance, and nobody was talking about those things in the industry. So that was kind of the two-pronged approach, was like really establish ourselves as leaders in this niche, which is like the stuff that everyone's struggling with, but no one's talking about, and then build our audience by borrowing other people's audiences. And the idea was, if I invite you on as a guest and you have authority in the market, the worst case scenario is you're going to like share your interview on your social media and we'll get access to your audience that way. But the best case scenario is we'll build a relationship and then you'll give me an opportunity to speak to your audience more directly. And that really has panned out quite well over the last 5 years.
So I'm on your website here. You seem to have a 3-step approach to how you're serving your client. First, it's model your agency's performance. Second, it's implement advanced forecasting. And third, it's install advanced feedback loop. Can you tell us about the 3 steps and details and why it works most of the time?
Yeah. So this is kind of how we think about building visibility into a professional services firm. And the first step, to your point, is we have to build a model for the business. And the problem that aims to solve is that so many times we talk to CEOs and founders and executive teams and agencies, and they're going to sit down at the beginning of the year and say, this is the revenue we want to hit. This is the profit we want to have. They might set targets for ops metrics like, oh, we're going to hit this utilization rate. And when I ask them, what is your business designed to do? And is it designed to accomplish that outcome? I usually get blank stares back. And what I mean when I say that is, well, we know that in a service business model, you're constrained by capacity. You can only sell as much revenue as your team can handle with their time, because that's the business model. You sell time. So when I ask them, hey, if everybody on your team worked exactly the amount of time they were supposed to, took all their time off, and all your projects were on time and on budget, what would the outcome be? How much revenue would you make? How much profit? And most of the time, they've never done the math to connect the dots between those things. So that's the first thing that we have to do, is make sure that we connect the dots between the team that you have, the expectations you have for them, how you price things, the financial outcomes, and the sales targets. And those things are very often disjointed. And that tells us, what is the business capable of? Is it capable of accomplishing those outcomes? And if not, what tweaks do we have to make to the business model in order to get to that outcome? And having that model built allows us to maintain that understanding on an ongoing basis. So that's the first big step, is what are we capable of accomplishing? So we know that the targets we're setting are realistic. And then once we know what we're capable of, the second step is, are we on track to do that? And that's about installing a forecasting system. That our big kind of shift in thesis compared to everyone else is, it's not about precision, it's about accuracy. So we install a very simple forecasting system that allows us to run a lot of simulations and very quickly figure out, what if we do or don't get a client? What if we do or don't hire a person? It's meant for executive forward visibility. And once we have that in place, then it's about installing feedback loops. So we thought this project was going to take this much time. How much time did it actually take? We thought this client was going to be this profitable. How profitable was it actually? We thought people were going to be this busy. How busy were they actually? So we can identify where the outliers are and focus our operations energy on closing the biggest gaps that are costing us money. And that's fundamentally the kind of 3 steps that we take to get someone to being able to take control of their profitability and do it on a much more timely basis. And each of those steps individually allows them to take a big step forward in the right direction. So even if they don't go all the way to step 3 with us, they're still a lot further along if they go through the first or the second step on their own.
What would be your top goals for the rest of this year?
The rest of this year, I've got 3 big goals. Number 1, launch our course, which actually comes out about a week from now. So we're really trying to get this framework out into the market to educate people on how to do this. And that's happening on Monday. I'm really excited about that. We've been working on it for a long time. So goal number 1, launch the course, really make this information more available to the public. Number 2, get myself out of the sales function in the business, which is an ongoing project. So we're starting to build a sales team. My calendar is now the constraint in our ability to serve customers, and my calendar is very full. So trying to build out that sales function in the company. And the third objective would be to grow our capacity for consulting and, bring on another consultant, get them trained up, which is quite a long process. It took about 6 months to get the last person ready to serve our clients, so that we can help more agencies. And that should effectively allow us to double our business year over year, which would be a great outcome for this year.
What's your mental model when it comes to data, goal setting? Is it just pieces of data you're feeding to your gut, and you let that gut take decisions in the moment? How do you digest information?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that we believe in very strongly at Parakeeto is that accuracy is more important than precision. And I think that those 2 things often get conflated as being the same, but they're often in conflict with one another. And this is one of the biggest problems that we see with agencies trying to do this kind of stuff on their own, is they try to get an understanding of client profitability by measuring something ridiculous like net profit per project. And that is an extremely precise metric in that it requires a ton of data points, and it requires to a project, but it's actually a very inaccurate metric in the sense that it doesn't tell you how profitable the project is. It's trying to infer the profitability of the entire agency based on one project, which is just like fundamentally a flawed idea. So our philosophy is really about trying to radically simplify the numbers so we can use a couple of simple metrics that are not expensive or time consuming to measure, that are not incredibly precise, but that's a feature. That's what makes them so cost effective. But that allows us to get an accurate insight into where we need to focus and what we need to do next so we can start taking action, because that's ultimately what it's about. And yeah, there might be a 10% error rate on that insight, but if it gets us to take the right action, that's the purpose. And if we can do that for 10% of the cost relative to this more precise metric, then I think that that's a really important thing. So when we think about data, that's so much of what we think about is working backwards from what's the question we need to answer in order to take an action, and what's the simplest and most cost-effective way that we can get that question answered in an objective way.
Marcel, thank you so much for today. The information you dropped, quite valuable. Where can people find out more about you?
Thanks, Charles, for having me. It's been a pleasure. If people want to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn, Marcel Petitpas. We've got the Agency Profit podcast if you want to tune in and hear me nerd out about agency profitability. And if you want to get access to this course that we're launching, you can head to course.parakeeto.com and check us out there.